Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. Close your eyes or rest them gently and take a deep, cleansing breath. Inhale deeply, and as you exhale, release any tension or distractions. As you breathe in, visualize a radiant light filling you with clarity, purpose, and intention. With each exhale, release anything that no longer serves you on this path. In this moment, we embrace the duality of existence, the balance between light and dark, challenges and victories. We recognize that growth often arises from our rebellion against the ordinary. As you continue to breathe deeply, remember that you are not alone on this journey. With gratitude for this moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes, prepared to embark on this podcast adventure. Hello, Megan.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for that meditation. It literally just, I had all this anxiety, as most do, when you're coming into something new, and my shoulders dropped, and I felt calm. And I was like, how can I get more of Kelly's meditations into my ears on a more regular basis? It tends to be one of those things that I don't always realize how much I need it until it happens. And then I'm like, oh, I need more of that. And so thank you for starting off our chat that way. I hope everyone feels as calm as I do right now.
I hope so too. I think you're spot on with that. Sometimes we don't know that 1 minute of time, like the 1 minute meditation, the 1 minute like just breathing, how much difference that can make for us in our day. And if we just took 1 minute, it would be such a shift.
Right. It's
Speaking
so
of
true.
shifts. Speaking of shifts, I want to talk all about you and who you are and what you do. So why don't you give people your little background info?
Wonderful. So, hey everyone, I am Megan Rafuse. I am a CEO and co-founder of a company called ShiftCollab, which is a Canadian national virtual mental health practice. We practice all across Canada. And I love telling people that I'm actually a therapist turned CEO. That is my biggest accomplishment, is the journey of becoming a therapist and really, having the privilege of walking the journey with people as they're dealing with tough things and as they're dealing with life challenges or major life milestones. And it truly is a privilege to share the journey. I've learned so much about myself. I've had so much growth in that role. And so I just feel really grateful that now I've shifted my skill set into learning something new as CEO, but I will always be a therapist first. So I'm coming at you today from that therapist CEO lens. And you know what? Something I'm also really proud of is ShiftCollab is female powered. We have 91% of our staff identify as female, and of our therapists and staff. And so over 125 therapists, 17 staff members, and 91% of those are female. And so I just love empowering women to do what they do best, to have support in doing what they do best, and to be able to make their mark on the world.
Oh, I love that so much. I love everything you said about that, from talking about how you learn so much from your clients, because I feel that too. I think I've made a few clients a little uncomfortable. Even though I didn't want them to be uncomfortable, I think I've made them a little uncomfortable because I've said, I'm learning as much from you as you're learning out of this. I'm getting so much out of our working together, so thank you. And I think some of them are like, okay,
Yes.
then what am I paying you for? No.
I know, right? But on the flip side of that, have you ever been to a therapist where it feels very like blank slate, white coat, they don't share anything about themselves? And oftentimes, you know, you hear like, well, I feel like they're just a robot, or I know nothing about that person, or they're just not human.
Yeah.
And so, both with the therapist on our team and how I practice, I think that those relational moments of like, we're on this journey together and we're both human and I'm learning from you. We're learning from each other and I am championing you on your journey. And I get to leave this journey and travel with things that you've taught me. And
Yeah.
what a gift that is. I've learned more from clients and people than I have from any textbook ever. And,
Yeah.
I think that's such a blessing and such a gift. And so, I just always love acknowledging that because it brings me back to, my client work. I'm currently full-time CEO, but it brings me back to those days when I had a lot of growth and I might have been struggling with my own stuff. And I
Mhm.
would go into session. Maybe my client was dealing with something similarly, and they didn't really know the full story of what I'm dealing with. Obviously, there's, some limits to what I
Yeah.
would share as a therapist. My client's not going to be my therapist in session, but there
Yeah.
is this, there is this learning and growth that just comes from human sharing conversation and sharing lived experiences and wisdom. And so, I just love being a therapist. And I'm glad that, we share that in common because it really creates a special bond.
Yeah. I totally wholeheartedly agree with all of that. And I think this, taking this out of the mental health field even, or like out of just being a therapist, I think using every relationship you have in your life as an opportunity for growth and for mutual learning, whether it's a relationship with a partner, a relationship with a kid, a relationship with your boss. Like, all of these areas are places where we can each be teaching each other something, and they're all places where we're coming up against our edges. And if
Yes.
we're not trying to like
Yes.
push through or to grow from that, like, what are we even doing?
Totally, totally. And as humans, we're wired for connection. We are
Yeah.
built for connection. Obviously, it's evolutionary, like it comes from, our need for survival, but we are wired for connection. And what that looks like today looks a lot different than it did, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But we need our communities, we need our relationships, we need people to lean on and ask for support from and offer that to them in return. And so, I always love to think about who are the people in my life right now that I feel really connected to, that really
Mhm.
offer me something that helps me to feel supported and connected. Who are the people that I offer that to them? It's not
Mhm.
always an even game when it comes to relationships. It's, I might need more right now and I might give more at another time. But one of
Yeah.
my friends once said, she said, it's really cool to look around and remember that we're not going to get the same thing from every relationship. And so she was like, I have my girlfriends, certain girlfriends will tell me like, okay, we're going to go have fun if you're struggling. We're going to go dancing. We're going to go do something really exciting. Another one might be the one that, you're the shoulder that they're the shoulder that you cry on. Another one might be the one that just has known you since childhood and really understands how you tick. And then you
Mm.
might have your partner and they give you emotional support in a different way. And I just
Yeah.
love that idea of regardless who we're learning from and sharing this journey from, every single person in our life, fills up our cup a little bit in different ways, but all of them are ways that we all need to feel cared for and supported. And I just love that idea
Yeah.
because it helped me to think like, you know, I know now who to go to for certain things that I feel like I need. So if I need a pick me up, I'm going to go to that friend who is like, let's get lunch. And I know this best restaurant and I'm going to have like a full on conversation for an hour. But if I need a shoulder, I'm calling another friend that I know they have like a really comfy couch. We'll watch some movies. We'll have a good bottle of Kleenex, maybe a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And, I love the idea that we get different things from different relationships. If I want to
Mhm.
laugh, my toddler makes me laugh all day long. But I also
Yeah.
recognize I need a break from parenting. So when I need that break, I might go to a friend or a relative to get something else that I need to feel parented
Yeah.
that I don't get from the parenting role. So I just love the idea that we all have different roles and we all have different
Mhm.
needs. And as humans, I think that's part of what makes this life really meaningful and exciting.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And being able to step into those different roles and access those different parts of ourselves too is it's just really magical. So you started off as the therapist and now you're in the role of CEO. So like who are you? What do you have to access that's different in yourself to be in that CEO role?
Oh, that's a really good question. And, I'll preface by saying that what made me a good therapist, all of those skills, doesn't necessarily translate into the skills required to be a CEO. And
Yeah.
so in my early days of making that transition to CEO, I honestly really struggled. I had this idea in my mind of what a CEO is. So it was like someone in a suit who like looks at graphs and data all the time and like uses this data to make sense of their business and then
Yeah.
makes cutthroat decisions and is a
Yeah.
really strong leader. And, I probably got that idea from movies, from TV, from this idea of like who a CEO is. It was always
Mhm.
a man that I imagined. And so
Mhm.
I would be like, well, how do I be me in this role? And what I started learning is like, you know what? I get to define what it means for me to be a CEO. What is it that
Yeah.
my company needs from me? What is it that I bring to the company that actually, helps the company to succeed, helps to drive culture, helps to make my team feel excited and supported? And none
Yeah.
of that had to do with wearing a suit, looking at graphs and charts and being, like direct and hard headed.
Yeah.
And so it was like this big learning curve of like this idea of like who I was supposed to be versus who I am. And I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome for a long time. So I would go and introduce myself in rooms of other CEOs and I'd be like, yep, I'm a CEO too.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
really didn't feel the role. But once I started actually working in the role, I Googled like, what does a CEO do during the day? And thinking through like,
Yeah.
how are my tasks aligning with that? I really started to realize, you know what? I am a CEO. I have to own the role. That is how my company will thrive. And to me, being a CEO means showing up authentically every day. It means recognizing I don't always have the answers and I don't
Yeah.
need to. I have a brilliant team. It means naming my mistakes. So I am learning too. This is a new role for me. And I have a really strong support system. I lean on my community. I ask for help because, there's that idea of this like independent CEO, but that doesn't actually exist. Once I started to get
Mm.
to know a few more CEOs, I realized all of us were really like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm learning as I go. I'm building the
Yes.
airplane as I fly it. And I was like, what? That's not just me. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of what I've learned as a therapist and a lot of just who I am, I want to bring that into the role so that
Mm.
I can actually model it for the next generation of CEOs so that
Yeah.
they don't have this like imprinted idea of who a CEO is. They can be a CEO too. And
Yeah.
so, it's a learning curve. Every day I am learning. Every day I practice my muscle in making decisions. I practice my muscle and really work to strengthen it in like, what does it mean to be a leader who has to make tough decisions for the purpose of her company? However, doing it in a kind, human way. So
Yeah.
that's how I tend to lead. I have a sticky note. I will show you that I keep on my desk, and it says clear is kind. It's a Brené
Oh,
Brown quote. It lives on my monitor. I look at it all the time, and it reminds me that I can do hard things. Being clear and honest in my
yeah.
feedback and asking for the same in return is what will help me grow. It's what helps other people grow, and what makes Shift Collab a really special place.
Yes. Yeah, I just have to call out that, you saying that you had this idea of what a CEO was, and that in particular that it was a man. Because I was doing this coaching session for around Happy Rebel for a few years ago, and what she just asked me, she got to this point where she was like, "Well, what does an entrepreneur look like?" That's what it was, is entrepreneur.
Yes.
And I was like, "A man." A bossy, like kind of self-important, confident man. And it came out of me and I was like, wait, wait, I actually believe that? Oh, I do, 100%. And I'm still working on trying to rewrite that story for myself and what it is to be a business owner and to have balance in my life, what it is to be a business owner and have time off, what it is to be a business owner and be a woman. And I still I'm trying to wrap my head around that still at this point. So it's incredible to me that you're at the level you're at, and you're way many, many steps ahead of me, but that you've navigated those waters.
Well, and I think it's easy to also, I want to challenge that I'm many, many steps ahead. I don't know. I don't know if there's a linear point that we get to in our growth
Mm,
as being business owners. I think we all bring strengths. And maybe what some of the strengths that I carry that I've learned in time, maybe they just came naturally to you. Or
mm,
maybe, you have strengths that I'm like, tell me how to do it, because I don't have that. And so I think
yeah.
it's really important to think, like, if you are a small business owner, or even if you're taking on a new role, so trying, like, being promoted at work, parenting, leading a new committee, or being part of, like, starting a support group, or whatever it is you're doing. That's why it's so important, when you're leaning into new roles, lean on other people, because they have skills that we don't yet have, and we have skills that we can support them in. And it really helps to even that playing field and get out of that idea that, you know, I'm lacking. And so
Mm,
I must be an imposter and I'm not there yet. And I like to think, there's no such thing as there. So, we're this year for our company, I always say revenue doesn't matter, but people are always curious. They're like, well, how big is it? And we're almost at 8 figures. We should hit it this year in revenue a year. And something I want to always be clear of is that doesn't mean that I also am perfect at my job or know
yeah.
exactly what I'm doing. It means
Yeah.
that I do a lot of trial and error, and sometimes I make the wrong choices. But if I gave up or shut down or didn't take chances or risk again, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be where I am today. It's been a 7-year journey. I'm
Yeah.
learning every day. And of course, there's moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? Like, I just should go get a 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
And, there are moments like that. And then I remind myself, my goal is to have an impact in this world. And this is how I can use my gifts to have an impact. And it is really hard. A lot of things in life are really hard, and I can
Yeah.
do hard things, and I can do them in a way that feels authentic to me and ethical to me, and pushes me, and I recognize it's really hard, but it's also, I get to meet incredible people like you along the way, where I am inspired, and I bring that with me into my day-to-day work. And I'm like, right, Kelly is doing this. You know, like, what can I learn from her? She's taught me a lot already. Like, she's over there doing it. I can be over here doing it. And we're both, like, in the universe working hard. And I
Yeah.
really, really value that. And you know what? I don't know if that like vision of like male in suit looking at graphs who's like pretty crass. You know what? I actually don't think that person would get all those benefits of being open and vulnerable and community minded that
Yeah.
we get. And in turn, that just makes us better leaders. So I'm going to challenge that notion
Yeah.
of what entrepreneur looks like, on social, in the media.
Hmm.
We see all of that, and just be authentic to ourselves. I always challenge the idea of like the miracle morning. Do you do the miracle morning? Do you follow
Not
like get up at 5 a.m. and journal and do all the things?
okay, so sort of. Yes, I sort of do. But it's really I think about it as I call it my morning ritual. And
Yes.
yes, it includes waking up earlier than the rest of my house. Yes, it includes journaling and meditation. Yes, it includes a little yoga. Sometimes it includes like pulling an oracle card or whatever, or, reading it. And but for me, that's my practice that keeps me grounded. That's what sets me up for feeling like my day is it well, okay, how I sell it to clients, but really how it feels for me is that it's like by 6 a.m. or by 7 a.m., I've already accomplished some things. I've already taken care of myself. So then I can go out
Yes.
and take care of other people. Because if I don't take care of myself first, I don't know how to be as present with people and to allow them the space to get their needs met because mine haven't already been met.
Okay, I really like that. I won't challenge your morning ritual. I really like that. And admittedly, and maybe I challenge it because I might feel shame around it, where I'm like, oh
Mhm.
no, I can't get up that early. I've always been a night owl.
Mhm.
I really struggle with early mornings. My alarm goes off. I'm like, oh. But I think maybe what I challenge in that is that, you know, there's this idea that in order to be the best entrepreneur, you have to do that.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I'm like, okay, maybe we need to challenge that shame and say, when are you making time for yourself in the day that works best for you? And I love how you are like, you know what? This serves me. It helps me to
Yeah.
go into my day. I've taken care of myself. Now I can take care of other people. For me, it's at the
Yeah.
end of the day. I want to reflect on my day. I'm working really hard to not like binge watch Netflix and, watch Love is Blind and all of the
Oh my god,
things
I love Love Is
that
Blind.
I
Ah!
do too. I do too. And admittedly, I've just watched the last two or the new episodes last night. But admittedly, my goal is like, how do I reduce that leading up to bedtime or pushing my bedtime so that I can listen to a sleep meditation, so that I
Yeah.
can, do some stretching or do some yoga or, write in my gratitude journal. And I think
Mhm.
something that is really important is if you're shaming yourself for like not being able to have a ritual in the morning, it's less about when you do it and it's more about just doing it and
Yes.
making the time and giving yourself permission to practice what makes you feel good.
Mhm. 100% agreed. Just because it works for me in the morning, I nobody has to do it in the morning. Do it at night, do it in the middle of the day, do your personal practices whenever. But for me, I'm like, people just do them. Just do like those little things for yourself. So you wish you would do nighttime meditations and gratitude journaling and that sort of thing every night. What what else helps you bring you back to yourself? Because that's kind of how I always think of it for me is like
Mm,
coming back home.
yes, I love that. Admittedly for me, it's been a learning curve. So
Mhm.
I live with ADHD, which
Yeah.
means I can become oppositional against setting my own rituals and routines, which like most
Yeah.
ADHDers know, like this is so frustrating. I'm like setting systems for myself, and then I'm like, I can't even follow my own system. Like, the
Yes.
version of me today makes these lists, and I'm like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to do this. Like my perfect self tomorrow is getting up at 5 a.m. and she's really good at that, and she's going to do it. And then I push snooze, and suddenly this this image of my perfect self is like washed away. I shame myself. I'm like, oh, you couldn't even
Yeah.
do it. And to get out of that cycle actually takes a lot of work. And so
Mhm.
what I've started doing is just being mindful of the things that I do throughout my day that helps me to take care of me. I have a toddler,
Mhm.
my routine is a little all over the place. And
Yeah.
part of that is also remembering, even if it's really hard right now, even if, I'm transitioning him to a toddler bed, which is like a whole journey
Oh
in
my God.
itself. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole journey. And, even if, our routine feels different or my husband and I don't get that same connection,
Mhm.
before bedtime because one of us has to be with our toddler. What I
Yeah.
really think about is what am I modeling for my son? What do I
Mhm.
want him to see me do to take care of me? And, for me that motivates me. I obviously he's like going to be 3, so this is like a new practice for me. But I
Yeah.
always say like there's things in our lives, whether it's, our partners, our work, our friends that help us to kind of envision ourselves as like, well, how do I be my best self for them? Or what would I say to the person I love the most if they were really
Mhm.
struggling and setting time for themselves? I would never say like, "Oh, great, you just like envision your future self tomorrow, but like, oh my gosh, you can't be her." I would
Yeah.
say, what are the first steps to get you to do what feels really good for you? What was the thing that you did last week that felt really great? So for me,
Mhm.
I always like am mindful of actually make a little list and I'm like, okay, what nurtures me? Like what
Yeah.
nourishes me? And I've learned this over the years because what I used to do is be like, oh, okay, like, yoga really helps my friend, so it must help me too. And I would go to
Mhm.
yoga and I would like, feel like a 2 out of 10 in the nurturing scale. And I would be like, I'm just not getting it. But then I would keep trying to force it, being like, well, it nurtures my
Yes.
friend. Why is it not nurturing me? So I just have a little list. I keep it by my bed. And I'm like, when I'm really struggling, I'm like, what is it that I know nurtures me that I need to go back to? And on my list, there's things that are like 2 out of 10, like yoga. There's things like, a meditation, which might be a 7 out of 10. There's coffee with a good friend, which is always a 10 out of 10.
Mhm.
And, my capacity isn't always going to align with doing a 10 out of 10. That like might take a little bit of effort. So maybe
Yeah.
tonight I do a 3 out of 10 and that nurtures me enough. Maybe, that's all my like emotional bank account needed. And
Yeah.
I just like to think about it as like, how do I rate them? They're not always going to be the same. So, today I'm feeling pretty good. A 10 out of 10 feels great. Tomorrow, like a 10 out of 10 might feel like a 12 out of 10. And I
Mhm.
just need to like kind of feel that, but then go do it anyways because I know I need a big deposit into my emotional bank account. And so that's
Yeah.
honestly my system. And it sounds, it can sound a little methodical to some people or be like, or feel like, oh, like that's like really data driven. And in my life, even though I am a CEO now, I'm not, I'm a feelings person. I'm an intuition person.
Yeah.
But in order to create habits for myself, accountability, tracking data helps.
Yeah.
So that's really what I've learned over time. I tend to think out loud. So I always love like a good debrief or connection with someone
Mhm.
else. Um, but I also think, you know, we all kind of learn as we go. I have a feeling like one morning you didn't just wake up and be like, here's the steps I need to help me feel like I, took care of myself. It's kind of
Yeah.
like this trial and error. And that's how I approach it is trial and error. Every day is different. And for me, I can push myself. I don't force myself and I allow myself to listen to what I need, what my body needs.
Yeah.
And that nurtures me to get through the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely did not wake up one day and was like, "This is my perfect morning routine." It was like years of so I mean, I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I think um well, I'm a little resistant to labels, but that might be my happy rebel talking. But anyway, but I identify with it a lot. And I I would do this thing for years and I still do it, where I would get into a routine, it would feel really good, and then I would be like, I need to change this completely. I need to do something totally different. I can't do this every single day. And then I would do something different and all of a sudden my whole routine would be off. And I was like, what am I doing? You have known for decades of your life, Kelly, that you need routine.
Yeah, this resonates so much. I am like you. Like, I tend to self-sabotage and I'm like, I'm like, oh, I've been doing this like for a week and like the dopamine just feels less and less. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I need something novel. If you were
Yeah.
able to go up in my attic, you would see like my collection of like hobbies that went to die. And it is so that it is like I need the novelty. So I really admire you recognizing that routine is
Mm.
great for ADHD.
Mhm.
And the irony is that, we need that dopamine. We can be oppositional for ourselves. And I
Yeah.
love that you're like, no, Kelly, you need the routine and it makes you feel better. And here's how you can stick with it. Like I
Mhm.
think that is a really big accomplishment. And
Oh,
something that I think self-care is all about is knowing what you need and allowing yourself to challenge the distraction
yeah.
and just keep going.
Yeah. Did you I don't know if you saw it was a year or 2 ago. I was seeing in the winter, I was seeing all of these Instagram reels, or I mean, I'm not on TikTok, but I'm sure it was on TikTok. And there were all these reels where people were like my therapist told me that I have to go take a walk, so I'm going to take a walk. And they were like angrily kind of strutting around. And I was like, yes, this is how I feel sometimes in the morning when I'm doing my routine. I'm like, I don't want to do this stupid thing and I have to do this. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, I feel great. I'm zen.
Yes. Honestly, I sign up for things. So right now I'm in yoga and Pilates. And like
Yeah.
beforehand, my brain is like, I don't want to go. Why should you do that? And in my head, it's like taking the stupid class for my stupid mental health. And then you leave and you're like, I feel great. And every time my husband is like, I told ya. Like every time he's like, you should just go. Like you can't fail. And like he tries to be like, your friends are going. He knows me enough to know
Oh,
that like I'll try to give myself any out and justify it. And I asked him, I was like, I really need your help with this. He's
mm,
not lecturing me, but I'm like, can you just help me remember how I feel when I leave? And so
yeah.
it is that. It's like I'm walking there and I'm like, why am I doing this? I have so much other things to do. But I know that my brain and my body needs that. And
Yeah.
I think that's just part of it is like it's recognizing it usually feels pretty awful when you have to think about doing it. But then once you
Mhm.
do it, you usually feel pretty good. And so, in the
Yeah.
therapy world, it's like we call it behavioral activation. But in the like living normal human world, we call it like it's gonna kind of feel kind of awful. And then usually once you start doing it, it feels pretty good. It's the same as running. Like no one is like, I
Mhm.
can't wait to go for a run. And if you are, kudos to you. Like you're a rare breed. But you put
Yeah.
your shoes on, you get in, you're running for like 10 minutes. And at least when I'm in that phase, I'm like, I'm not stopping now. Like I've already started. And so it
Yeah.
really is, thinking through what works for me. What
Mhm.
systems do I need? Who do I need in my life to keep me a little bit accountable?
Yeah.
Um, and that's what helps me get through it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I also take meds for my ADHD. And
Mhm.
since I've been medicated, I just honestly am way more functional. It's like my brain got what it needs. I am so
Mm.
much more functional. And I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
shame and judgment that can come with taking medication. And that's why I'm really open about it to be like, you know what? This is what I need. It really helps me to function.
Yeah.
And I feel really proud of myself at the end of the day, not only because taking medication helps me to take care of myself, but
Mhm.
because I was able to do the things that maybe was like a super slog when I wasn't on my medication. And so,
Yeah.
you're getting me unmedicated today, admittedly, because I ran out of my prescription and I'm waiting for it, but you're getting me very caffeinated today. And, caffeine
Yeah.
helps me too, but I operate best knowing being medicated helps. And so, if you're on medication and you feel some shame, I always say, you know, everybody's journey is personal. Some,
Yeah.
like you said, you don't love labels. We don't need labels. If you're someone who doesn't like labels, don't use the label. If you're someone who a label helps you make sense of yourself, use the label. If you're
Yes.
someone who, maybe you're using holistic remedies and you take medication, that's what I do. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing in taking care of ourselves. And I
Yeah.
think we can be bombarded by those messages of like, if you don't do it this way, then you're not
Yeah.
doing it right. Or if you don't do it this way, you're not doing it right. And I think the best way is the way that works best for you.
Oh, 100%. Yes. I tried. When I was in a really low point and having a lot of difficulty functioning, I tried meds and they just were not for me. And for me, it was getting routine and um, doing doing some of the alternative things. But also, I wish there's some part of me that kind of wishes that medication could have worked because that I think I tell myself it would have been less work.
Ah, interesting.
And
Yeah.
I don't actually think that that's true because I
Hmm.
think you bring up a good point that there's a lot of work to do to accept that you need help in the form of medication. And I think for me it was like almost shame around like why doesn't this way work for me that everybody else it works for them.
Totally. And I thank you for acknowledging that because that is shameful. It's like there's shame in being like, why do I even need to take meds? Like I should be able
Yeah.
to use other tools and they should be good enough. Or, here's this tool that's medication and why is it not working for me? Why, it helps other people. Why is it not working for me? I have to use all these other tools. And, the way that I always say is
Yeah.
it's a toolbox. We get a toolbox. Some of our tools work, some of them don't. Sometimes we need certain
Yeah.
tools at certain times. And that always, at least for me, helps me remember, if I'm struggling or I'm going through something new, I have a lot of tools that I've built up in my toolbox. And I have a lot of people I can turn to who also have other tools that maybe I don't know about yet. And it
Yeah.
reminds me like, okay, I can try a different tool. I
Yeah.
really struggled postpartum after the birth of my son because I stopped taking my ADHD meds the whole time I was
Mm.
pregnant and for the first 6 months. And I was spiraling. And it took some of my friends to be like, I'm just checking in on you. Like, what tools are you using? Because, we're kind of worried about you. And so
Yeah.
I'm currently expecting, I talked to my doctor. We talked a lot about the research of taking medication, ADHD medication while pregnant. And I decided that this will be my journey because I know that I am less stressed. I am less anxious. I feel way more confident and able to be
Yeah.
the person I want to be when I'm on my medication. And I also use all the other tools. I sleep, I take my prenatals, I exercise, I
Mhm.
do all of the other things that help me to be who I want to be. And I think our health is so subjective
Yeah.
and we get to decide what we do for ourselves. And so if you're like struggling and you're like nothing is working, maybe it's time now to be like, okay, what tools do I need in my tool belt? I am
Yeah.
not the problem. It is not me the problem. The problem is I just might not have the right tools right now or know how to use my tools. Maybe I need like, a manual to be like, how do I actually use this tool? Because I'm
Yes.
struggling and I don't know what this one does, but I know I need something else to help me.
Yeah. No, 100%. Absolutely agree with this so much. I started doing a kind of intense like boot camp workout class that used to be my method for like working, for fitness. It was like, okay, do these intense classes. I feel so great, da da da. Well, 8 years ago, that worked really well. Now I'm like, my body is a different body than it was then. I'm older, things are hard. This like just feels harder on all of my joints and everything. And it just does not feel as good. And mentally, I was noticing I was so much harder on myself that it was more difficult than it used to be. And so I was like, okay, this is not the class for me right now because I cannot do this and be kind to myself.
Yes. Yes. And I think so many of us, what you just said, so many of us can learn from that because
Mhm.
I use the analogy of like how many of us are reading books that we just like don't find interesting, but we're like, I just need to finish the book. Like I
Yes.
just have to finish the book. I can't not. And there's something about giving ourselves the grace and the permission to really just think, it's okay if something isn't working for me, that I can
Mhm.
stop and decide what works better. And it takes
Yeah.
courage to just like raise the flag and be like, this is not my thing right now. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean I'm failing. It doesn't mean, I can't keep up or do what other people are doing. It means I just need something different right now. And
Yeah.
it's not easy to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but how did you feel after? Like were you proud of yourself, or was it like what was that experience like?
Yeah. For me of the workout
Yes.
class.
Yes,
Okay.
for you with the workout
Um
class.
so I did feel very proud of myself after the workout classes. I felt very strong. I felt very like brave. It was great. And also after doing it for I think 6 weeks, I noticed that like my body just hurt all the time and it wasn't sore muscle hurting. It was just like my joints don't like this. And so then when I decided to quit and to try doing stuff on my own, I'm only like a week out. And so I'm still kind of like with the medication stuff, like still feeling some shame around why couldn't I keep up with that? I used to be able to do those things. I was so fit and strong. And I'm still in the phase of really unpacking all of the baggage around boot camp classes and how my body is different.
Yes. And it's, I always think like, what does this version of me need? Like what that
Yeah.
version of me needed yesterday might just not be what the version of me needs
Yeah.
today. Um, I know I live with anaphylaxis, and
Yeah.
I developed anaphylaxis randomly in 2019. I just started having random anaphylactic reactions. And admittedly, they started at a time when I was really burnt out. I was practicing as a therapist and I was running the business. So I was essentially doing two jobs at the same time. And it completely flipped, you know, how I viewed myself and the things that I could tolerate. And so, like you, I used to do intense boot camps. And then I noticed I was having reactions with extreme exercise and with heat. I
Wow.
left spin class one time. I tried out this new cool spin class and it was dark and everyone was loud music and there was
Yeah.
strobe lights and I could feel my symptoms starting and I like hopped off my bike. The instructor was like, ma'am, please get back on your bike. And I was like, I gotta go. And it
What?
really changed one, the ways in which I could move my body, two, the ways in which I had to be mindful of what I'm eating, and three, it's not within my control. So I honestly,
Mhm.
I have an incredible immunologist. We don't know what it is. It's been years of
Wow.
testing. I've done all the tests and it's called idiopathic. We don't know what it is. Thankfully, I'm on some medication for that now, which helps to have less reactions. But it also
Yeah.
means that I really have to be mindful of what I'm putting in my body, how I'm exercising. My body has changed.
Mhm.
Um, and I found actually exercises that really suit me right now. So yoga and Pilates, I love.
Mhm.
I feel supported. It doesn't trigger me.
Yeah.
And I'm just mindful. I carry EpiPens with me. And honestly, for me, it was a lesson. Obviously, it's difficult and not ideal, but it was a lesson in control. And so, I don't get to control everything in my life. My body is struggling right now, and it needed certain things like me to recognize I can't work the equivalent of two jobs. I had to pare back
Yeah.
my work schedule. And so, I think for a lot of people who maybe have a health crisis or have, a mental health crisis, it's telling ourselves, hey, I need to listen to what my body is
Mhm.
saying. And I really ignored my body for a long time. I would do intense workouts. I ran half marathons. I pushed myself. And I don't think it was because that's what my body needed. I think it's because I wanted that, like, it was a productivity thing. It was like, look at me, I'm running half marathons. Look at me, I'm so
Yeah.
productive and I work out. And now I really am mindful of, what does my body need? And I'm not always giving it
Yeah.
what it needs. I mean, I recognize as a mom of a toddler, and a
Mhm.
CEO and entrepreneur, sometimes I skip lunch or eat lunch at my desk, or I have like two coffees on the same day, or I skip workouts. But for the most part, I've
Yeah.
just learned to listen to what it's saying. And I think for women, especially, when our body changes, there's a lot of shame around that. And there's a lot of, well, I'm not in control, or I made a mistake, or I don't have my shit together. And
Yeah.
in reality, what it is I might be going through a hard time. I don't know what my body needs right now. I haven't been listening to my body and I need to start.
Mhm.
And so I think it takes courage to really be like, you know what? The version of me who needed one thing is not the version of me who needs something else, and that's okay.
Wow. I I'm just stunned to silence in hearing you talk about the journey through having these anaphylactic reactions and just I've had one. I had found out that I'm allergic to wasps and like needed to go to the ER and all of that. And so then every time I've seen you post about when it happens to you, I'm just like
Hmm.
I know what caused mine. So I had that piece where I could control it. But you don't know what causes yours, and that is such a kind of having to having to give up control, but really having to give up this idea that we know and that we can have we think we that we should have an idea of what's happening in our bodies and happening all the time. And we can't always know it.
No.
It's
And,
crazy.
I'm sorry to hear you also had a reaction, because they're really scary. Like,
Yeah.
it happens. I call 911, the ambulance comes, and it is really scary. And, I think it's interesting because, when people ask me, well, how do you deal with that? Like, there's a lot of
Yeah.
fear. And what always sticks out to me is the story I tell myself when that happens is always, that paramedic was so great. And they really heard me and listened
Mhm.
to me and trusted that I know my diagnosis. Or like,
Yeah.
wow, nurses work really hard in the hospital. And I'm really grateful that, I'm not a long-term patient. And
Yeah.
I tend to have this gratitude, even though the situation is out of my control. There are things that are within my control. I can
Yeah.
normalize how scary it is. I can talk about how hard it is to not know when it's going to happen. It impacts my life. Last time I was supposed to go for like a beautiful massage at a really nice spa the next
Mhm.
morning, and I just didn't get out of the emergency room on time and I had to cancel it. But the people at the
Wow.
spa were really kind, and that's all I could really ask for is, if I'm not in control, which there's a lot in my life I'm not in control of, I can choose to focus on what I am in control of. And, I'm not saying this from an idealistic place. I think it's easy to be like, oh, yeah, just focus on what you can control. It takes
Yeah.
work. It's really hard. I grieved, the healthy version of me for a few years. I felt the
Yeah.
losses. I, really had to cut back on drinking because it would be a trigger for me. I love a glass of sparkling wine. I love eating, like, it's kind of like Canadian Chinese food full of preservatives.
Yeah.
And, that also triggers me. And so, I had to cut back on that. And so there's certain things that I grieve, but in reality, I'm still in a good place. I still mostly have my health.
Mhm.
I have an incredible medical team who are like working with me to figure out what it is. And I just have to do the work to choose what to focus on.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard. And I think, I always say as an entrepreneur, there's this idea that we just like do what we do and we feel really confident in doing it. And
Yeah.
we wake up every day like, yes, I've got this. And, I earlier I was thinking as I was prepping for this podcast, I was like, when I first started as a therapist, someone recommended this book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways.
Mm,
And I don't even remember what the book says inside, but that title sticks with me
yeah.
because I get really anxious before I have to do an interview or podcast. I am a perfectionist and I have to challenge all those perfectionist ideals.
Yeah.
I make a lot of decisions in the day and not all of them I feel good about. And
Mhm.
so I want to normalize that like all of us are human. All of us have things to work on. Not everything is within our control, and we don't have to feel great about doing everything we do. But I think when we give ourselves permission to just be like, this is going to be hard and I can do it,
Mhm.
we really get to flex our skills, and that's how we grow. And so
Mm.
if you're here being like, oh, she's grown this business and she did all these things, I always want to remind people, we're all struggling. We just struggle in
Mhm.
different ways. And, if I can help you and I can lean on other people, then that's really what we're here for, is lean on your connections, because none of us come out of the gate being experts at what we do. It takes practice
Yeah.
and learning. So just don't get down on yourself about that. No one has it all together. There's a lot you don't see behind the scenes. And when you get a little up close, you're like, oh, that person struggles with this too. So just
Yeah.
normalize. Everyone feels certain ways. We all have different zones of genius and gifts. And, I always say, like, trust yourself in that, because, if you're not sharing your gift with the world misses out on that.
Mm. Yeah. Truly. Oh, you are such a gift. So I'm so glad that you could come on and share all of your personal practices and all of kind of just the behind the scenes on your journey with everybody. So thank you for doing that. Where would you like people to find you or to find your business if they want to do some
Yes.
therapies?
Thank you for having me and sharing this special conversation. I feel so open with you. It was definitely the
Aw.
meditation at the beginning. I'm going to keep listening to that one.
Oh,
But you can follow me directly on my Instagram at Megan, Megan, Rafuse, Rafuse. I'm working hard. That's where I feel a lot of imposter syndrome of showing up and posting. So
yeah.
follow me on the journey as I learn to really trust myself and show up. And if you want to find my business, we are www.shiftcollab.com. And on Instagram and LinkedIn, we are at the ShiftCollab.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.